My name is Dave Householder, and I am your Bible teacher at the World Wide Web. I'd like to take you for a walk with me around my neighborhood here in Huntington Beach, California, and talk to you about the story that motivates and informs your life. And we all need to have one, whether we're conscious of it or not. We put together a narrative that brings meaning to our lives. And we build on that narrative our whole lives. I'd like to help you differentiate between facts and narrative or story. There are facts. For instance, I am walking up Main Street. Fact that I'm using an iPhone 7. Fact that it's a sunny day here in California. Those are facts, but they don't mean anything because facts have no meaning. You measure things and it's a certain length. You weigh something, it's a certain weight. And my weight was a little down this morning, so I'm really happy about that. But that's just a fact. We put stories together to make sense of the facts. And you are consciously, maybe not consciously, constantly doing that. Always putting together stories to make sense of the facts. And you create a narrative, and I create a narrative about our lives. Someone says, "How was your day?" You wouldn't rattle off facts like I was driving on asphalt. You would say, I felt like I had to go see someone. And that is meaning as opposed to just facts. And we need both. Facts are important, and ideally, we want to build our narratives and our stories on facts that are reliable. But if you get the two mixed up, fact and story, it gets really, really confusing. And a lot of people have stories about what's going on around us that are not the same as yours, and they might contradict yours. And this is what Paul was talking to Timothy about in 1 Timothy 4. Timothy was a young leader, and this young leader was doing the best he could, but he needed some support from Paul. And Paul writes to him about interpreting the things around him and pointing out to Timothy that a lot of the stories that he is hearing and believing are not helpful, and that he needs to stick to a narrative which builds up his inner self, his soul, and brings him closer to God and what this chapter calls righteousness or uprightness, honesty, integrity. And it's so easy to get caught up in all the stories around us. And one of the problems with the internet is we have lots and lots of stories and narratives to choose from, and they're in conflict. American political life now has two gigantic narratives that are going after each other, and you can easily get caught up and ground up in that. We have a story in the Bible that makes sense of the stuff around us. And it's so important when you're picking narratives to buy into and to enter into the big story of God's story in the Bible, whatever it is you're doing. It's important to pick narratives that build up your inner self and to understand that to be intentional about what your story has been, what your story is now, and where you feel led to go in the future, and where you feel your story is leading is really key. To be intentional about where God is bringing you and to do all of those things with prayer. Otherwise, you get to the end of your life and you don't have a cogent story. And people get up and aren't able to articulate a story about you at your funeral. I think it's so important to pay attention to the narrative that you're building. Right now, we've got a whole bunch of facts around us. They're very complicated, having to do with COVID. And how we interpret them, and people are interpreting them many, many different ways. How we interpret them is key. I was talking with a young man yesterday who said that this pandemic was a great gift to him because it helped him stop some unhelpful things that were going on in his life, rethink, reposition, and get involved in some serious creative work, which I think is just absolutely outstanding. There's facts around us, and how we respond to them and the narrative that we put together makes all the difference. We're all living with the same facts, but we can either choose to write a story or a narrative of faith, or a story and a narrative of despair and depression and anger and resentment. What the Bible does, Bible shares some facts and a lot of narrative. And that narrative has stood the test of time. And I'm not all that smart, and perhaps you're not the sharpest crayon in the box either. And it helps to get a jump start by borrowing the faith of people who have put together narratives that work, narratives that tell us where our place is in this whole thing, narratives that help us to engage in creation, have a positive sense of where God is bringing something, and a positive sense for how we can act and behave in the world. So we're going to be bringing you these daily Bible teachings every day, and I want you to tune in, listen to every one of them, and pay attention, because the story you choose makes all the difference. And that's the good news for today. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.